that he's split between biology and writing. And he wants to know if we've ever been tempted out of our fields from one pole to the other. Like, have I been tempted over to biology, and have you been tempted over to writing? And he's hoping that we'll illuminate the perceived gap between humanities and science. There you go, buddy. You want to start?
That struck me as a particularly interesting question for me, because I trained as a biologist, not as a writer, and yet here I am making a big chunk of my living as a writer. I wish I had taken Frances's courses as an undergrad. So to the extent that writing involves engaging in the humanities discipline, I don't see any distinction at all. I'm curious to know more about your course, what we know and how we know it, because that sounds to me like the title of a science course.
Yeah, and that's what you're teaching all the time, right? Is what we know and how we know it. I think it's kind of interesting, too, because I think science and the humanities both have an underlying narrative arc, and the science arc seems to be, what is that? How did that happen? Let's do an experiment. And I sort of think the classic, at least, Northwest humanities arc is a stranger comes into town and everyone freaks out, let's have lunch. That's the humanities arc, which is like, here's an odd object, how do we contextualize this situation within a culture? And yours is, let's do an experiment, right? But they both have this climbing the hill, epiphany, and then the little denouement slide.
Right, so everything I write about is, it starts with a question and what I'm going to answer, and then guess as to what the answer is, and then an experiment to figure it out. But when I'm working on the book, I spend most of my time looking for good stories and figuring out how to tell them, and then trying to weave them together into a coherent narrative that spans a whole chapter. So
yeah. I mean, I think if there was one thing I wish for all of you is that you become good storytellers.